How many of you drive cars? I would assume most people. Did you know that driving a car and the emissions that are released from it are a main source of emissions that lead to global warming? The more you know. And so that's what I'm going to be here talking about. I'm going to talk about, global warming and how it is in turn pretty much killing the planet. So, global warming, it may sound like a confusing topic, but, I'm going to, break it down easily by talking about what it is, what contributes to global warming, the regulations that are put in place to help limit global warming, and how, and what can be done to help reduce it. So to start off, what is global warming? So in an article put out by the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, or NASA, it says, scientists attribute the global warming trend observed since the mid-20th century to the human expansion of the greenhouse effect, warming that results when the atmosphere traps heat radiating towards Earth or from Earth towards space. So what that means is that these emissions or greenhouse gases are produced from Earth, and then they are raised up into the atmosphere, and then they're trapped in the atmosphere, where the sun then beads down on it and heats it up, which in turn heats up the global temperatures. So these greenhouse gases are in turn leading and causing global warming. And so the four main gases that make up greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. And these are what make up greenhouse gases. So I have a diagram here that's going to talk about and shows that. So you can see those are the four main things I talk about: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases. You can see the main one, carbon dioxide. Obviously you breathe it out, but from cars, manufacturing, industry, all that. And then you can also see over here, that's just another example that shows where all these greenhouse gases are emitted from. You see over 75% comes from three things: industry, producing goods; transportation, driving, flying, using boats, all that stuff; and electricity, producing electricity from like burning coal and all that stuff. And all those, those are the main industries and factors that lead and produce greenhouse gases. And so that leads me to what can be done to help, reduce these emissions. So when you look at, act and government regulation, I'm going to start with talking about the Clean Air Act that was introduced in the 1960s. That pretty much introduced, the catalytic converter, the main thing on cars that helps reduce, sulfur and lead that were produced from cars and the emissions. And in an article put out by the United States Department of Environmental Protection, it says lead has been eliminated and sulfur levels are more than 90% lower than they were prior to the regulations. And that's talking about in conjunction to the catalytic converter that was introduced into the cars. That was the main thing that it did. And that's just an example of a regulation that was put into place to limit these greenhouse gases that are emitted. Current day, when you look at the Trump administration, what he's doing is putting regulations on industries and how they can dispose of waste and gases and all that stuff. And an article also put out by the United States Department of Environmental Protection, it said total U.S. greenhouse gases emitted reportedly decreased by 2.7% from 2016 to 2017. And so that like I said, that's from his administration. That's just a little small 1 year thing. And you might think to yourself, 2.7%, that's not a lot for, a country such as the United States. And, you're absolutely right. 2.7% is not a lot when you look at the global scale of the problem. And so that leads me to talk about how can you make this, how can you reduce emissions? Individually, you can do things like buying goods from local market, local stores, local markets, so it doesn't have to travel such a far place, reducing the emissions, using public transportation in order to reduce your emissions on an individual level from your car, per se. Those are things you can do. Furthermore, what can be done is, government officials putting more regulations on industry, importing and exporting of goods, how waste is disposed of, how what chemicals can be used and produced, during these processes. Those are things that can be done in order to reduce the greenhouse gases that are emitted, in turn, lowering the rate of global warming. And so, overall, it may seem like a huge problem, and it is. Don't get me wrong, but it can be managed if everybody helps and does their part. If everybody tries and, uses public transportation, does a little thing, and then it also comes down to what the governments of the world can do and, the regulations they put in place. Obviously, it's going to, take time and money, but if, people don't act soon enough, irreversible damage is going to continue to happen. You can see things like icebergs melting, the raising of the sea levels, drier summers, bigger, larger wildfires, all of these are contributing factors that, they may seem inconsequential, but over time they're going to stack up and add up. And all of this is due to the rising global temperature and global warming, and that comes about from the greenhouse gases. So if, people don't start to act, these irreversible consequences are going to affect and in turn, could end up hurting and killing the globe.